Hello and welcome everyone. Today we're going to be taking a look at the PvP specs and tier list as far as the top 10 specs goes. This is basically throughout all of PvP, so it's including ranked and regs. It's going to go ahead and go through the list. So starting at number 10, we have our Pyrotech / Plasma Tech. The reason why this spec is at number 10 because it has excellent AoE damage, it has good crowd control. The things that really hamper this spec though, the spec is kind of clunky to play. It requires a lot of micromanagement to keep your dots and everything rolling on targets, and sometimes you can get overloaded with the heat resource management of it. And then it has weak single target damage compared to other PvP classes. At number 9, we have Vengeance / Vigilance. It's a pretty strong spec in 8s, not so much in solos. But the pros to this one is AoE damage, so this has some of the highest AoE potential in the game. It is very easy to punish new players with this spec. New players tend to group up and stack on top of each other, which is what this spec basically lives for. And it is relatively easy to play in the grand scheme of things. The spec really has a repeatable smash that it just hits over and over again on cooldown to spread its dots. Pretty simple, kind of fire and forget. The problem with this spec is that it melts under any type of focus, so any type of anyone focusing the spec is pretty much just going to churn through its DCDs, and once that happens, the spec just dies. It doesn't have any anti-focus, so it has weak defensives, and it melts, and then it doesn't really bring a lot of utility to the table. There's nothing that you could basically say this can bring that another class can't. So that's why it's at number 9. At number 8, we have our Merc / Mando healer. So they have very good defensives. It's probably the easiest healer to play, and it's very good playing solo. So if you're queuing solo 8s or solo rank, it's very good just to play by yourself without much coordination. The class can really take care of itself pretty well. It struggles with AoE healing. It's more of a problem in an 8s format than it is in solos, but it really struggles in the AoE department, and then it doesn't have a whole lot of mobility. Once it basically uses rocket out and then hydraulics, that's pretty much all it has, and it can be CC'd through that, so that's why it's a little bit lower than than the other healer on the list. Next we have, at number 7, we have Fury / Focus. This is going to be our highest spec that we have for our Marauder / Sentinel. The pros is default splice genes. We all know what it does. Basically gives them unlimited vanishes. It really needs to be removed, but the fact that the spec can run it and not lose DPS makes it better than the other two specs currently. It has very strong defensives combined with the vanishes. It's easy to play. It's the easiest Sentinel / Marauder spec to play. It provides good utility with predation, and it provides excellent damage. So its damage is top class. So there's a lot of things going for this spec. The cons of the spec, it really needs a healer to shine. It doesn't do very good just playing by itself without some type of healer. It doesn't bring any CC to the table as well, so it's not going to stun anything. There are talents to take it, but if you're taking those talents, you're giving up too much. So 99.9% of Marauders / Sentinels aren't going to take the CC utilities, and if you do take them, you're just giving up your little offensives that you have. And the other thing is its damage is very predictable. You can actually really time the animations if you're playing against Fury in like a solo situation. You can see the animations coming and pop your DCDs at the right time. It's just damage is very predictable. The animations are very big. It's very easy to see things like that. Next, we have Concealment / Scrapper, so coming in at number 6. The reason why this is coming at number 6 and it's a lot higher than what it is for something like a solo ranked environment is because in 8s it absolutely dominates. The reason for that is it has probably the best objective control in the game right now, and follow that with its good damage. And the biggest thing about this spec is it punishes new players. New players have a hard time dealing with a lot of the operative specs. This one in particular, just because of its mobility, and they don't understand that it really is kind of a one-trick pony, that it can't do two things at once. The best way to really kill an operative is to pretty much CC them and then just dump all your damage into them. They don't last hardly ever. So it brings us down to our cons of this spec. So it has bad defensives, and then again, like I talked about before, it's just weak to crowd control. Any type of CC or stuns that doesn't have a CC breaker, it just melts instantly. So it's very weak to that. It's very big. So Concealment has one of those situations where it's very good the worse the player is, and it gets worse and worse the better the player is. So if Concealment is facing a player that is good against one of the better players in the game, it really struggles right now. But if it's facing an average player, it absolutely will demolish them. It's kind of a very new Broly spec in that department right now in PvP anyway. At number 5, we have everyone's favorite burst class, Advanced Prototype / Tactics. Its burst is absolutely ridiculous. It's got some of the biggest and fastest bursts in the game. It also brings just great CC, great crowd control, and then the spec, honestly, is just easy to play. Its rotation is simple. There isn't a lot to think about in it. Really, the only thing you have to do is think about your power load and managing your DCDs. The weakness of the spec, though, is it is prone to focus fire. Whenever anyone says a PT, because of how much burst it has, people get scared of the spec and they really want to take it out before it can do any damage. Its defensives are not that great. They're not on the weakest side like an Operative, but they're still mediocre at best. And then it's getting nerfed. So putting time and learning this spec right now as a new player, I wouldn't suggest it. A lot of its damage is going to be taken down based on what's on the forums and everything, and the feedback that we've got from the developers. So the spec is going to be getting nerfed. It's probably going to be going down these power rankings once that patch does happen, and it's a pretty significant DPS nerf. Next, at number 4, we have Lethality / Ruffian. Another Operative / Smuggler spec. Again, it's just these specs really tend to punish the newer players, and this spec is also very good solos right now. So top tier damage. It is very good damage. Cleaves is very good. It is hard to shut this spec down. You really can't. It has a lot of DR and some things, and just its rotation just can't really be shut down. You can't really just CC it out. The other thing it has going for it is it has good stealth, so it can basically stealth out of any situation that it gets into. The cons of this spec right now is it's squishy. Like most of the Operative specs, that can be taken down if everyone focuses it. The problem right now, though, is in regs and 8s with the level of PvP play currently, it just doesn't get focused ever. I mean, the most you'll ever see is 2 people on it, and it's just not enough. Lethality can get away from 2 people. It really needs a coordinated effort by a team to take it out. The other thing is the damage can be anticipated, so there's no burst in this spec. The most the spec is ever going to hit is like 22, maybe 30k at the most. Without doing anything where the game just kind of bugs out. So it's a lot of fluff damage, but it's easy to, but the damage is so strong and so high that it can really overwhelm healers. At number 3, we have our PT / Vanguard Tank, the strongest tank spec in the game right now. It has very good damage. So the damage for this tank spec is actually really high if you play it with DPS gear. Since tank stats really don't work well in PvP, you're going to be running this with DPS gear. It's easy to play. This is probably the easiest. This might even be the easiest spec to play in the game right now. It's pretty much 4 buttons and then your cooldowns and some tanking abilities and things like that. It has good crowd control. It brings a lot of utility to the table with its stunt, with its CC and everything. So it's very good, especially with its cooldowns. Cons about the spec, it really doesn't have any sustain by itself, so you really need to play this with a healer. That's the biggest con of this spec. That's why it's ranked so high, because its really only drawback is it's not very good by itself. It needs support, but when it does have that support, it absolutely shines. At number 2, we have Deception / Infiltration. Again, this is a very dominant spec right now. It has huge burst, coming out of stealth and bursting someone, especially when you're talking about newer players and like 8s. It actually is doing really well in solos too. So Deception is just top tier damage. Good CC, and basically can stun people and almost to 100 to 0 them. Generally, you'll be able to get someone with a good CC chain about 20%, be able to finish it off. Like I said, stealth, new players always struggle with stealth. And then the spec is easy to play. There's not a lot to the spec. There's not a lot of mechanics you really need to watch out for. It's pretty much you have your cooldowns, you hit the buttons that are flashing, and people die. It's countered by crowd control. The biggest problem with Deception is just kind of like Operative Concealment is it can really be just crowd controlled out. Because its defensives aren't that good. So its defenses are relatively weak. Once you stun it, if it blows through those defenses, it's just a sitting duck. It has nothing left. And then finally at number 1, we have basically what we're considering is the hardest carry in the game right now. So Operative / Smuggler heals. It just absolutely has just an enormous raw healing output. it's far and above the other healers. Its AoE heals are ridiculous. You can't really focus the spec because it can vanish out. It can CC you, it can walk away, it can root you, it can do a bunch of different things like that. So it's really hard to focus it, especially if it's playing with a tank. You just don't ever focus the operative healer. It's better just to tunnel the tank at that point. Cons are, it is squishy. If you actually can get it CC'd and actually can not have it have guard by some tank, you can blow it up relatively quickly. There's a lot of micromanagement to this spec as well. It's the hardest healer spec to play, with all the tactical advantages and the med packs and everything that you have to put in everything. And then the positioning of it, well, you really need to think about your positioning because it has a lot of AoE heals, but AoE heals requires you to basically be in the middle of the fight. You have to kind of think about your positioning, especially if you're playing it solo. If you're playing it with a tank, not so much, just because guard is just that strong right now. So that is the tier list, the power rankings. Not the tier list, the power rankings currently for PvP in general. Like I said, this isn't a solo or regs, it's just a general PvP rank that incorporates both of them. If you guys have any comments or questions, please put it down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, see ya.